Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer. And if you didn't notice, let me point it out to you. I'm wearing my hard hat today because we're reading the Book of Accidents. With accidents, we need headgear. We need to make sure that we don't take any more brain damage than has already been sustained from the reading of this book. That's a little mean, but you know what? According to this, there's a multiverse where I didn't say that, so it's okay. Maybe I'm the evil one. I accept my fate. There we go. Now we are a true construction. There, I need to switch. It just goes off screen this direction. There we go. Now things are real because I can fling around my smigarette. Okay, anyways, in case it's not obvious, we're going to talk about the Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. This is a book that came out in 2021. I had never heard of it before. I had never read Chuck Wendig before. I knew his name of having like it flown around in places before, but I couldn't even tell you what for. I've just seen the name Chuck Wendig and know that he's related to Hollywood. But I was interested in the cover because that's a cool looking cover. And that's pretty much what got it. And the name, the title got me. That was a mistake. But we like mistakes here on this channel. So you're going to experience what I experienced to some extent as we talk about this book. However, but let this be a cautionary tale. Previously to reading this book, I had no opinion on Chuck Wendig. After reading this book, I believe that his hands need to go in glass jars to rescue the rest of us from what comes out of them. Because holy cow. Anyways, be prepared for maybe a little bit of spice today if it's not obvious. And by spice, I don't mean schmexy readings. I mean, there are over 500 pages to this, and it was... I got opinions. I got some opinions. If you have read this book, I will be interested in knowing what your thoughts are on it. Divorce the author. If you've got issues with the authors, because mostly what I've heard about Chuck is just people having beef with Chuck, and I have no idea why. But if you have beef with this author, I don't care. I want to know what your opinions are on the book or the writing. Even if you haven't read the book, just as we go through and you get a sense of what the story is about, I am looking forward to that discussion because and this is the like worst thing is there are elements in this book that works, and I have never read a story that didn't have elements that were interesting stories, multiple directions in which a story could go, and it's like I can see something there. Obviously, that's not where it went. Obviously, anything I say here is not going to change anything. It doesn't matter unless I wanted to write my own version, which in some cases I am inspired to write my own versions. Usually not, though. Usually I'm more inspired to write stuff based on stuff that I love, like the Westies came out of Red Dead Redemption, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, we're going to get into Chuck and the Book of Accidents. However, before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using the prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we go over some of those things together. Try to make sure that your story has the elements of the prompt, or else they're more likely to be cut. The second thing is, if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit the first chapter and the cover, that first chapter will be read here to hopefully help more readers find your work. Just make it a little bit easier to be discovered. I know I'm not large. I know that I can't make anybody click anything, but I try to present your book as unbiasedly as possible, so that people can at least get a taste, a sample of that first chapter without having to commit time to even just reading it. They can listen to it like a podcast and maybe just be so enthralled by your skill, by your storytelling, that they want more. And the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, which may also be books of disasters, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books. And now if you give them a chance, I hope that you enjoy them, but I don't expect you to, but I at least hope I don't waste your time. With that said, let's jump into this story. We got a long way to go. Oh, this is longer than I thought it was. Going in with the first page reading for the vibes, quote, Edmund Walker Rees was a man of numbers, not an accountant or a mathematician, but rather a man of simple interests, and it was here and now in the Blackledge SCI, State Correctional Institution, that he sat strapped to an electric chair, running the numbers. 3 guards walked him here. They passed 7 other prisoners on death row, each in his own cell. There would be 1 executioner, too, an anonymous man who would throw the switch, the man who would end Edmund Rees. It was 10 p.m. on Tuesday, 2nd Tuesday in March 1990. Time, after all, was a number 2. But there were details that he did not yet know, and so he asked the older guard, who was slitting Edmund's prisoner jumper up the calf to make room for the electrodes. The leg had already been shaved that morning, right before Edmund Walker Rees, Eddie to his friends, of which he had none, at his last meal, a simple bowl of wholesome chicken noodle soup. The older guard, a man named Carl Graves, had sideburns so gray and wispy that they were like bits of fog clinging to his jowls, though the tops of his hair were dark and not yet taken by age or drained of color. He was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, it was hard to tell. A whiff of sourness on his breath, cheap whiskey, Walker thought. Carl was never drunk. Not really, but he was always drinking, smoking too, though here the whiskey seemed to mask the smell. So first, you're going to notice that bizarre comment in the middle of this where it says he was known as Eddie to his friends, of which he had none. That's going to be a constant throughout this book, where the author just destroys any tension, any suspense, to like try to make little quippy comments that are basically nonsense. Because like, why do we need this aside that his name is Eddie, but nobody calls him Eddie because he has no friends? It doesn't mean anything. And this is to the point that the author trades in authenticity and character voice in order to make quippy quips all the time. And it just destroys everything. After reading, and then, when I was reading this, there were people on the server who were sharing writing advice from this author. And it just becomes more clear that the entire voice of this book is just the author talking. And certain characters are obviously much more raw versions of what feel like the author. So this is just me, analyzing the words. I'm not actually going to make any claims about the author, but it does feel like specifically Maddie, the wife, is closer to probably how the author talks with all of the swearing, the very immature swearing that I've talked about before in previous videos. And it's not like you can't swear and swear heavily and have it be a character trait, but there's a way to do it that makes it feel like the character is supposed to be immature. But swearing in this, especially because it's Maddie, is made up to be like the author is having the woman do it because she's acting impolite and unladylike as what society says. Because she has other statements that she goes, well, this is what people expect of women. And because this is expected of women, I do the opposite thing. I don't smile. I do all of the housework. I do art that is very hard labor. I use a chainsaw, and that's because I'm a woman and people don't expect it of me because I'm a woman. And it's just completely defined by trying to not just subvert expectations, but by lifting up the middle finger to what it believes are social expectations or societal expectations instead of just being your own person. And to me, if you're trying to make some statement about society or against society as an individual who is then using your identity to protest against norms, I think if you define yourself as the opposite of social norms, you're still just as conscious of all of the norms that you are expected of and defining yourself by societal norms. Because you're not just letting yourself love or like or do what you want. You're still thinking of, well, what do they say that I'm not allowed to do? That's the thing that I'm going to do. So other people are still defining you. Even if you're not like, well, they say that girls are supposed to be demure and caring or whatever. So I'm going to be the opposite of that. Still defining yourself by society's terms. That is not rebellious. It's childish and it's weak. Anyway, that's the starting rant that we're going to go with. Eddie here is about to be electrocuted for having murdered a bunch of little girls. Why? We don't know yet, but there were more than a handful of them. He was trying to get to 99, we're going to find out. One of them got away, and that's what he was thinking about obsessively in this moment. It's been a while since anyone actually got the chair in the state, but Edmund has no one to save him, and by the end of the chapter, he is electrocuted, technically, but also he kind of just disappears into smoke and teleports out of that situation. Now we go on to a second prologue, because for some reason this book has 2 prologues and neither of them matter. Honestly, Edmund Reese is a useless character that really has nothing to do with the story and just gets thrown in. And it feels like he's thrown in because the author was like, this is scary. This is horror. I'm going to throw in what it feels like. And we're going to get into it. So I'm sorry if I like repeat myself on this a couple of times, but it feels like the author saw what were popular tropes and things and then just threw in a bunch of things that he had seen in other places to build this story, because a lot of them are nonsensical. A lot of them feel like they are just there for the vibes, especially when we get into this later, when one of the characters gets teleported to an alternate dimension, because yes, this is going to turn into a multiverse story. Spoiler alert. I hate I hate multiverse stories, but this just makes no sense for multiverse. Anyway, okay. So one of the characters gets teleported into a multiverse that changes the Boulder area from the original one, the original location, the original universe that they're existing, the main characters existing in, into a theme park so that it can have like the theme park, the creepy abandoned theme park atmosphere. And then he gets attacked by clowns when he's in a tunnel. And you're like, what does this have to do with anything? This is just for the visuals. This is just for the vibes. There is nothing to do with the story here. We're going to get there and you're going to see what I mean, because we're at the beginning of the story and you do not know the trauma I have been through that makes me need to wear a helmet while I talk about this story. Okay? So we go into a second prologue. At least it's marked as second prologue, unlike in freaking Meme Harvest. And we have little Mike O'Hara. Oh, and we have Mike O'Hara, who is nobody important. He gets his whole name in here, and we get comments about him and his background, and he never comes up again. But Mike O'Hara is out here hunting when a little boy appears in the wood covered in blood. It's all dried. Mike remembers that this kid had disappeared not that long ago. There were posters up in town, and he just came out of the mines that Mike was hunting around, it seems. Mike offers to help the kid, and shortly thereafter notices that the kid has a pickaxe in his hand. The kid then bum rushes at Mike and slaps the pickaxe through his head, killing Mike like he's mining for gold in the guy's brain. That's it. Now, does this ever come up again? It does not. Does this child ever come up again? He does not. What is the point of this? I need answers, Chuck. Then we go into chapter 1, which is going to introduce the first of our three main characters, and the three main characters are all family members. You have Nate, the father, who is an ex-cop from Philadelphia. You have Maddie, who is the wife and mother, and she is an artist. And then you have Oliver, who is a 15-year-old boy who is so empathetic that he is psychic and can feel other people's pain and take on their pain, sort of. Quote, "This is Oliver. The boy, 15, knelt on the ground, his chin against his chest, the soft undersides of his forearms pressing into his ears, even as his fingers dug into the thatch of messy hair at the top of his head. His ears rang sharply, not the tolling of the bell, but the shrill whine, like that of a dental drill. To one side of him, yellow lockers. To the other, a water fountain. Above, a waterfall of blue fluorescence. Somewhere ahead were two gunshots, bang, bang. Each made his heart jump. Somewhere behind him were the murmurs and rustles of students moving from classroom to classroom seeking safety. Oliver imagined them dead. He imagined his teachers dead. Blood on the linoleum, brains on the chalkboard. He imagined weeping parents on the news and the suicides of survivors and the thoughts and prayers of uncaring politicians. He could see the pain like a little ripple that became a wave, that met other waves and became a tsunami roaring back and forth over people until they all drowned underneath. A hand grasped his shoulder and shook him. A word spoken as if through a fishbowl. His name. Someone was saying his name. Ollie. Oliver. Ollie! He gently rocked himself back on his ankles, sitting partially upright. It was Mr. Partlow, his bio-sci teacher. Hey, lockdown drill's almost over, Oliver. Are you okay? Come on, kiddo. Let's get you. During the drill, it appears that Oliver had wet himself. The other kids are laughing, he's crying, and the teacher is trying to get him up and get him away. We then get an introduction to Nate, Oliver's father, who's a cop in Philadelphia, and he is meeting with his father's lawyer because his father is actually dying of colon cancer. Nate hates his father deeply because his father was very, very abusive. When the lawyer says that Nate's father is offering to sell him his massive estate in the very rich part of town, kind of out in the boonies, Nate says no, he doesn't want it because it'll slap him with taxes if he tries to sell the house later. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want anything to do with his father's property, anything to do with his father's livelihood, and doesn't want to make this deal that he'll buy it for $1. He honestly, he truly believes that even this last offer of "do you want my house" is just his father trying to screw him all over again as one final screw you. The lawyer assures him that the deal will be there until the father passes, and after that, then obviously there's not much more you can do. Then we get an introduction to Maddie Graves, who is married to Nathaniel and is Oliver's mother. We find out that Maddie is an artist who hates capitalism. Now she is working on this project when eyes appear being painted onto something that she didn't remember having put there, like she went into a trance and it just ended up there or something. And now she is freaking out. She admits that she sort of goes into trances when she does art, but she is absolutely sure that she never drew these eyes. She would have remembered it. They feel familiar to her and they're following her across the room, which is also freaking her out. She's then talking to her grandmother, who also has punky spiked hair. Then her phone rings. Maddie gets frustrated, but answers the phone. It's Oliver's school, and she knows that something is absolutely wrong here. Nate and Maddie are then arguing about what happened to Nate during school at the drill, partially because of his extreme empathy that he got so freaked out, and they're arguing because he peed himself, because the classmates all laugh at him. He doesn't fit in with the classmates. It feels like it's such a strain for him to be in school, and they're not really sure what to do about it, but Maddie doesn't want her son to suffer anymore. Nate specifically doesn't like the word empathetic because it sounds like pathetic, and his son is not pathetic. It's such a stupid argument. Nate's not even listening at this point. If you go, look, your son isn't pathetic, he cares a lot. Don't call my son pathetic. I don't like it. Just listen to people talk, Nathaniel. They're arguing about what they're going to do with Nate's father's house because obviously Maddie now also knows that the house is being offered. Nate doesn't want to move into it. Maddie does. She thinks that it'll be a great break for them to like move out to the country, get away from these city schools, and give Oliver a chance at something else, something quieter, something further away from the active school shooters drills that are happening in Philadelphia. And Oliver is hearing all of this argument and eventually comes in to tell his parents that he wants to move. Quote, "You sure?" his father asked. Ollie nodded. "Yeah, the city is hard." It was. The noise, the lights, the uninterrupted hum, but worse than that, the people. They were good people, but the pain he could see, it was everywhere. So much pain threatening to crush him, as it had today during the shooter drill. It washed over him like a wave every day, and it was getting worse. He just needed less of it. Maybe moving would give him that. Maybe. The dad finally agrees that he will buy the house from his old man so that they can move and they can give Oliver another chance at something else. Now, this felt like a very important moment to me. We're still in the beginning 5 to 10% of the opening of the novel, but we've got an introduction of an antagonist via the electric chairman, who I also think took over the body of that child in the second prologue, because that sort of made sense. And then you've got Oliver being psychically empathetic and wanting to get away from the city and the pain that he sees everywhere. These are two combating ideas. You know, somebody that caused pain because he was a serial killer, and then somebody that wants to escape the pain and can feel more of the pain and feel more with people. And it could even be maybe said that you could go into a direction of his empathy catching on to like ghosts or haunted properties or where bodies are buried because of electromagnetic energy, or however you want to, talk about it. So these things could have actually had something to do with each other. Now, do they? The answer is no. They don't actually have anything to do with each other. But I did write a note here to talk about what this setup looked like so that it could be kept in mind of the pieces that are being shown to the reader as we go through the story. And then you obviously have an inciting incident, which is them moving into this house, which would then cause whatever discovery would be the next thing relating to the empathy and the serial killer. That's at least what you would imagine from what we're being given. That's not where we're gonna go, but that's at least what it looks like is happening. So with all that said, Nate then meets with the lawyer to buy the house, only under the condition that he gets to see his father's body first. His dad is already thin and disgusting, and he belches even though he died an hour ago. Nate's thinking of all of the things that'll be in the house, including his father's gun collection, because his dad was a little bit paranoid. The family is looking to move in very quickly. And also, let me remind you, in case it wasn't connected, and let me inform you, in case it wasn't really connected, that Nate's father is the man that executed the serial killer guy that was in the prologue. Does that have anything to do with anything? It does not, as far as I could tell. But if you know something, let me know. There are a couple of interludes throughout this that I personally didn't find very important to the story here. Let me just show you an example of what the first interlude was. A squirrel is tempted into a tunnel where it is killed by a ringing noise, and an odd, deformed-looking human comes out. The spirit of the squirrel floats through the cracks somewhere. Does that ever come up again? It does not. I'm assuming it's supposed to be yet another reference to the multiverse, but it doesn't mean anything. Then we get into part 2. The family has moved into the property. Nate is uneasy because he doesn't see it as his house. He sees it as his father's house and the house that he was abused in as a child. And this causes Maddie to freak out, saying that maybe they shouldn't have left town. Maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe they should just go and change their mind. And most of Maddie's teasing in their interactions has to do with emasculating Nate. They do eventually make up with him saying that he'll figure out what he's going to do because everyone's new life is about to start tomorrow, with Oliver starting a new school, Nate starting a new job, and Maddie being able to set up a studio in their new house because it's a very large house, and then she can stick to doing her arts in her own unique space. They go find Oliver where he is at, and they've given him the attic to be his bedroom. Again, the fact that it's in the attic doesn't mean anything. It also just feels like another repurposed trope that has been grabbed and recycled from other stories that are horror or supernatural thriller, but it doesn't do anything. So they find him in his attic room, and they also find a dead rat on the ground with a spiral of ants going around it. They Google what the ant spiral is and find it is some form of ant suicide where they are caught in their own phenomenon. I also never saw where this made any sense into the story, by the way. It happens like twice, but it doesn't tie into anything, and I accept maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe somebody else can fill me in. Like, it felt like it was just trying to be a creepy thing, like you're looking at Signs, the movie Signs, but it didn't connect to anything, which is another reason why I'm like, this just feels like the author took a bunch of elements that he saw somewhere else and then shoved them into the book, but they didn't connect with anything because they're just meant to be like creepy or unnerving or scary because it's horror, but nothing is connected. Nate starts crushing the ants mercilessly. Ollie feels bad about it, and he can't help thinking that Ollie can't stop thinking about the ants and their pain even once the moment has long passed because of his empathy. Oliver is then doing a video call with his therapist, talking about the thing with the ants that happened a week ago, how it bothered him, and how things are kind of weird at this house, and the house is okay, but it just feels uncomfortable. The therapist is alarmed when Oliver brings up the word abuse and saying his father is not abusive, and then she asks why he chose that word specifically. Oliver says he thinks that his grandfather was abusive, but he never got to meet his grandfather, and now they live in his grandfather's house. The therapist insists that Oliver needs to make some friends, and she is going to help him do that. Spoiler alert, she does not help him do that. He makes friends on his own. Again, kind of mimicking a conversation of what the author thinks this conversation would be, but it doesn't tie into anything. Nate is at his new job where he is like security or something for a fish and game shop with a guy nicknamed Fig, and he's not looking forward to these changes. He's not really getting along with his new coworkers, one of which is Fig, and that man is being very aggressive, ultimately stating that he thinks Nate gets paid more for the same job because he's white. Why does this come up? I don't know, because it doesn't come into the story at any other point. It's just this character saying this, and Nate disagrees. Fig calls Nate clueless about his plights before saying whatever, I'm not getting into this with you. And then they go to patrol. And Nate is not amused by this, and he is like, patrol what exactly? We're out in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing going on out here. But they go anyway. This book also lacks so much characterization because you would think that there would be huge differences in Nate's psyche and what he's noticing, what he's thinking, the culture in which he fits in by going from Philadelphia city cop to being somebody in rural Pennsylvania, as opposed to being somebody in a rural countryside where you're not going to have anywhere near the same crimes as you get in literally nicknamed Philadelphia. But there's zero reflecting on any of this, and you're going to see in Nate's behavior that he has zero instincts as a cop. He has zero thoughts as a cop, and at this point, it looks like, or at one point, it pretty much, to me, is determined that the author just doesn't like cops and just chose this role for this character for who knows what reason. because they don't understand what cops do. This literally says that cops don't understand what their specific job is. You'll see when we get there because I marked it in my notes. And I want the specific verbiage to give you. It's now October, and Oliver hasn't found any friends in his new place yet. He sits down with some D&D players, and they start talking when this muscle bully man comes over and picks a fight with them. As the brawl ensues, Ollie feels something weird before the bully's fingers randomly snap. The bully attacks them, hell breaks loose, and the teachers swarm the area, ending the fight. There are a couple of things in this book, like the school shooter part, this sort of thing that reminds me of Stephen King. There are a couple of things in this that really make me feel like the author was mimicking Stephen King, but has none of the talent or skill that Stephen King has, and also has none of the empathy that Stephen King has. And I'm not saying that everything Stephen King does is fantastic, but there is or that he is a flawless author, but there is a sense of empathy in the way that Stephen King writes, and then the way that certain elements he picks and how he writes both the supernatural and the interpersonal, like when you're talking about, and the interpersonal, he cares about the characters, and he cares about what the plight of what the characters are going through, and this feels like a shallow mimicry of what Stephen King does. But let me know if you've read Chuck Wendig and if you get what I'm saying, because I mean, it could just be me, but that's what I categorize this as, constantly going through this story. We switch over to Maddie getting into her art groove after buying a chainsaw and making a wood sculpture, which is not going to be important at all. We're going to get so many red herrings in this book. Nate is out on patrol with Fig, and Fig is drinking kombucha because his wife is like, I want you to drink it, it's healthy. And then they come across this old tunnel that has ghost stories attached to it. But those aren't stories that Nate is worried about. The ones that he's worried about are the reasons why it's called Murder Tunnel. Quote, "This was thanks to the killer named Edmund Walker Reese. When Nate was a kid, Reese killed 4 girls in that park, nailed them to trees, which was, as the story went, 99 nails apiece, and then did the final dispatching of them with a pickaxe. Everyone said that he killed those girls in the tunnel, which wasn't accurate. Apparently, he snatched one of the girls, the first of them, as she took a shortcut through the tunnel on the way home. But stories had a way of getting their teeth into people, true or not, and it became common knowledge that he killed those girls right in that tunnel." Nate's telling Fig that the rumors of Edmund Reese disappearing at the electric chair were nothing but ghost stories. He would know because it was his dad that pulled the switch. This disappoints Fig, but he's like, whatever, it makes sense. As they're driving, they see a deer, and that doesn't quite As they're driving, they see a deer that doesn't quite look right. Quote, "There, in the road, staggered a white-tailed deer, a buck, immediately. Nate could see that it wasn't healthy. From a broad, 6-pointed rack of antlers hung gooey strings of raw red flesh. That, he knew, wasn't entirely unusual, though. That was just the animal's velvet coming off. Though it was a little late in the season for it, around early September, a buck deer worked his antlers against trees to scrape off the soft velvet lining. No, what made the animal look unhealthy was the roomy gauze over its eyes and the way that its head sagged and drool slicked its long muzzle and thick neck. The animal was thin, too. Nate could see the outline of its ribs under its hide. It stumbled about in a clumsy circle, from one side of the road to the next. It circled an invisible point, and Nate had a hard time suppressing a chill despite the heat of the day, because, sure enough, his mind wandered to those ants in Ollie's room, circling the dead mouse. I cannot shake the feeling that this was something that the author saw somewhere in another story and was like, that's cool. I want something like that, but in my story. Again, the ant thing makes me think of the movie Signs. And this isn't anything against being inspired or doing homages to things, because that's natural. That's a part of artists talking to other artists through their art, and making references is whatever. But it's just like when this book has what feels like zero originality in itself, and I know that's mean, I just don't know what else to say about this book. Nothing connects. Nothing feels organic or original. The characters don't stand on their own in any way. I don't know what else to say to this. Fig calls this deer sighting, quote, in a soft voice, softer than what Nate had used. He said, probably CWD. Nate gave him a quizzical what the frick look, and Fig filled in the acronym, chronic wasting disease. Zombie deer, they call them. Not really zombies, but sick in the head, prions disease, like mad cow. You would think that this is something so specific that it's going to come back. It does not. It has nothing to do with anything of what's going on, which makes it even more irritating when you're like, okay, number one, we're keeping our minds open for whatever the Book of Accidents is. Number two, I've already spoiled it for you. This is going to turn into a multiverse story. What the frick is a zombie deer doing in here? What the frick is the killer guy with all of the little dead girls? That's going to get more complicated, by the way. There's going to be a demon involved. There is going to be Armageddon involved. And then you've also got this guy's empathy. Oh, yeah. And then you also have the mom having this ability that when she carves some things in wood, they come to life. And so she's going to make an owl statue and it's going to come to life and fly around in like 3 scenes and amount to nothing. I know, I'm confused too. Like, I'm very confused what I'm supposed to be doing here. Anyway, Fig goes to shoot the deer, but his gun jams and Nate saves him. The deer got a little extra going on, quote, the muzzle rippled and bulged. One of the buck's nostrils swelled up and something wet and glistening appeared. A fat maggot, damn near the size of Nate's pinky finger, birthed itself into the animal's nose and plopped onto the ground. But it had friends, too. One by one, maggot after maggot squeezed from the nose of the deer and followed the others as they moved in a single line along the asphalt. Nasal bots, I think, Fig said, grimacing in disgust. Fly larva. It feels like a reference to something. This isn't going to come up again, where you think that it actually would, because you've got suicide cult references in animals and these bugs. But in actuality, and we're going to get to another point when this author just describes gore, and for me, it just feels like the author thinks this is what horror is. This is what is spooky and uncomfortable, and so like this is what they need to write to make it feel like a horror, but it's just performative. And because it's just performative and it's shallow and it's empty, it is nothing. Anyway, the bugs are acting weird, just like the ants, going into some strange circular pattern. Interrupting Fig and Nate's watch of the larva suicide dance is Nate's phone, and Ollie's school is calling. Already in trouble again in this new location. Maddie wakes up realizing that she'd gone into a blind frenzy again, a trance-like state of making a sculpture that she doesn't really describe to the reader. Her owl sculpture that she had been working on is now gone, and she has messages from Nate about Ollie getting into a fight at school. Since she has been MIA, Nate has been at the school talking to the principal, and it turns out that Ollie got into a fight with 2 sports guys who are kind of very important to the sports team. They're a bit like minor celebrities in this town, in this school. Obviously, just another cliche, and he's about to get suspended, but Nate threatens the officer, saying that he is a cop who knows how the system works, and it'll be best if they don't get lawyers involved, so he should take it easy on new kid Oliver. The principal relents and says that Ollie is not suspended, fine, whatever. You'd think that there might be repercussions to this. There are not, so this is just a deus ex machina. I don't know why this needed to happen. While driving Ollie home, the dad warns him not to pick fights anymore with people, especially not sports bros, because he's a gentle guy and they're not, and they will eat him alive. Dad says that's the only reason that he defended Ollie the way that he did, because he is a gentle guy and he doesn't deserve to be mistreated, but it's not always going to work out that well. After they talk that through, they're worried about Mom, since Maddie hasn't answered any of the text messages, any of the calls, and has just been radio silent. After having woken up from her daze and getting the text messages from Nate about Ollie fighting in school, Maddie decides to just sit around and read to try to calm herself down and calm down her anxiety. It is later that evening, and Nate is then trying to get to the bottom of why Maddie wasn't responding to anything about her son. Maddie doesn't want to talk about her absence because she is confused about her own mental absence and shuts the conversation down. You would think it would just be easier to have this conversation, be like, look, I'm out of my mind. I don't know what happened. She could at least be worried about freaking her husband out with this information because he's already uneasy, but it's just a refusal to have a conversation. Because one of the things that keeps this plot going is people not talking to each other. Nate then dreams of abusing and then killing his son after calling him a loser. When he wakes up, he goes to check on his son, gets some water, looks outside, sees some kind of figure out there that freaks him out. and it doesn't really make any sense. So he grabs a gun, goes back outside, chases down the figure while yelling at it. He's like, that doesn't look like an animal. It looks like a person, but I'm not really sure. Nathan catches up to the person, and it looks like a human with fireflies and a skeletal jaw just hanging open. There is a thunderclap that slaps the air out of him, and then the stranger disappears in a stream of light. When Nate sees again, he hears the voice of a different man, and this man is named Jed Homeke. And he's a pretty friendly man. He says that he is a neighbor to Nate's new home. He learns that this man is a writer of ghost books and hunting books, is pretty famous with a few awards, and even his wife is a fan of this guy. From the way that he talks, it sounds like something happened to his family at some point, and he says that he is not a good man while talking to Nate, so like he wants to help him, but he's like, don't trust me too much because I'm also kind of a bad man. Nate decides that he still likes talking to this guy and invites him over to meet his family for the upcoming Halloween events this month. As Nate heads home, he sees this massive owl in a tree, and then it flies away, making a wood creaking sound. For what purpose? I don't know. Her abilities never amount to anything, and it only shows up like this, never becomes important to the story, issues that it caused her, anything. Nate also has zero comment on this, doesn't even bring it up to his wife. It never comes up. So again, another part about how this book is written is like things happen, but people barely acknowledge that they happen. Like, you think that maybe he would talk to his wife about the weird deer. You think that he would maybe talk about this. You think his wife might talk about how she's losing her freaking mind out here and is getting paranoid. And it all started when they moved out here. But it never gets acknowledged at any point in the story. Not even to themselves in their thought. They never go, huh, that's weird. Maybe I should be worried about that. Even if they don't confide in anyone. At school, Ollie is worried about people hating him because of the fight that happened, and he's getting the vibes that it'll be much like the school that he left behind in the city, especially since he got into a fight with some of the popular jocks here. He thinks everybody's going to hate him. He is also worried about the bad things that can happen to him in general when going to school, like school shootings and serial killers and bad cops. His buddy Caleb, who is from that D&D group that he became friends with, is there and makes up with him. He says, his buddy Caleb from the D&D group makes up with him, says it's okay, he's still going to hang out with him, but he can't hang out with him today because he's got to babysit. And Ollie can't come over to his house because his family doesn't trust white people. When Ollie is biking home, he gets yanked around and then falls into a ditch. Here, the jocks have found him again and start pummeling him. Alex, one of the two jocks, who is not the leader, is about to drown him in a shallow puddle of water when Graham, the leader guy, pulls him back and says, look, dude, we're bullying him, but we're not trying to kill him. A young man around the same age as Ollie shows up wearing an electric chair shirt and who only has one eye, comes over with a gun shooting Alex and Graham. Alex is bleeding out the ear where one of the pellets hit him, and then the bully guys run off. This new guy comes up and says, don't worry, it wasn't a real gun, it was a pellet gun. That's not going to stop it from making that kid deaf by shooting him in the ear. The guy's name is Jake. And something to note about Jake is that Oliver doesn't feel any pain coming from this dude, which is also weird for multiple reasons. I'm asking myself so many questions now looking at this because like this is suggesting that he is a reincarnation or a multiverse version of the serial killer guy who died on the electric chair, right? But we're also going to learn that Jake is actually an alternate version of Oliver. But we're also going to learn that Jake has a deal with the demon to like kill Oliver to reset the multiverses. But it was freaking Edmund that had the deal with the demons to kill 99 girls. So if you think that we're going to get any background on the demon, we're not. It's just a vague reference that both of them make, but it's not part of any story anywhere. It's just like there. So again, it feels like another trope that was just thrown in there because, I don't know. Some things to know about Jake is he lives in a trailer park. He says that his neighbors are furries and he got a GED to get out of school early because he didn't want to have to go there anymore. He puts his number into Ollie's phone after doing a hard reset because the screen was all messed up from being tossed in the water by the bullies. Jake gives advice on how to fix the phone's damage, and then Ollie is really interested in Jake, becoming friends with Jake, and he is grateful for what Jake did for him. Maddie is talking to her friends about losing her mind while she is carving up a another statue. She's worried. Her friends are like, all artists are crazy, don't you know? But we'll help to make sure you stay on track with work, all right? So get back to work. She goes to work on a sculpture and it's turned into this weird looking person that she sort of recognizes, and it's making her sick. She can't name who it is, but they just feel familiar. She screams as the statue reaches for her throat. She realizes that the face she sees is Edmund Reese. She goes to get away from the statue, but is concerned that this is the second statue that has come alive. This time, it tried to kill her. That's a pretty mild response, all things considered. The statue just came alive. Now, if you're like, oh, this is the second statue to ever come alive, period, in her life, you would think that there would be a bit of a bigger reaction to this. If it's something that she's experienced throughout her life, okay, maybe. Is it something that she has suppressed? Different reaction, but there should be a reaction. If this is all of a sudden just happening on this property, and it's never happened before in her life. And why just these two statues? Are they the only statues that she's worked on while living here? Also, why is the statue freaking Edmund Reese? Is it just because Edmund Reese is haunting the property because freaking Carl was the one to pull the switch? I don't know. There is no background on any of this, by the way. Nate angsts about the state of the world and world history and people being overall garbage, mostly in Western history. And then Ollie gets home with Jake. He invites Jake to dinner. Nate gets a really weird feeling from this kid, like he has seen this kid somewhere before. Yeah, so Nate and Ollie are the same person, theoretically, are versions of the same person. So they look the same. And he can't look at this carbon copy of his son that has a different hairstyle and go, wait a second. That looks like my kid. What is going on? Right. Nate and Jake are then being antagonistic to one another at dinner, with Jake accusing Nate of being abusive, physically, sexually, emotionally, pimping him out to other men. And Nate is like, are you joking me? You are in my house. Stop saying this stuff about me. Stop insinuating things about my son. I would never hurt my son. I was abused as a child. Stop saying this to me. And Jake just keeps pushing, trying to get him to admit to it. Maddie and Ollie are out of the room at this point. When Jake finally leaves, Maddie and Nate talk about Jake, and they're in disagreement about whether Jake is a bad kid or not, because Nate is like, I don't trust that kid. That is a bad kid. And Maddie is like, I don't see what's so bad about him. Just let him be around. He's already been invited to the Halloween party that we're going to have here anyways. They don't know anybody in the community and they're throwing a Halloween party. But not only that, not only is Maddie being like, nah, he's a good kid, but she is so garbage. I should say the writing in this, because I can't even blame Maddie for being a poorly written character. It's the writer's fault. The writing is so garbage that in this argument, you get, quote, he's already bringing Caleb and some of the other nerd kids. They seem nice. Can't he just hang out with nice kids? Don't be like that. Did you always hang out with the nice kids? So mom is like, yeah, sure, he should go and join a gang as long as he's got friends, like diverse friends, are friends that are from different backgrounds and different levels of criminality. Duh, who wants to be friends with nice kids? It's such a terrible argument. Not only that, but again, let me remind you that Nate was a city cop from Philadelphia. Okay, I think he would know a thing or two about what troublemakers look like. He might be a little more paranoid. That might also be something that Maddie could confront him with, that he over-relies on that gut feeling at times, which probably not. But she could be like, you're just feeling this way because of what you're used to. But we're like out in the country now. People out here are not like the city people. You need to trust a little bit more. He might look like that, but it's just because of the low economic status or whatever. Like so many different ways that this could go by specifically using their personalities, their occupations, and having a more realistic conversation based on who they are. And it doesn't do that. It just goes, I mean, our son has enough good friends, right? Why not let him have a bad kid friend? Finally, we eventually, at chapter 24, have the Book of Accidents introduced, which I don't think the Book of Accidents has anything to really do with this plot. It just shows up another element that is just random. Jake has the Book of Accidents, quote, walking home in the deepening dark, Jake gave a twist to his wrists and a snap of his fingers, and with that flourish, a book appeared in his hand. The book was ratty and old, with a fabric cover and time-stained pages that fluttered as it appeared in his grip. On the cover of that book was a title hand-stamped with erratic, drunken kerning, A Book of Accidents, and beneath that, an accounting of accidents at Ramble Rocks, number 8. Jake talks about the book, quote, I won't fail, he told the book. I've met the boy. He's weak. But the family is strong, the book said with some anger. The family is never strong. There's always some... Jake had to admit that it gave him some pause that this family, this Nate, this Maddie, seemed so together. But Oliver really was thin as tissue paper. Maybe the family was strong, but the boy was soft, gentle as a butterfly. He just had to catch him and then crush him. Now, this part of the book feels like it wasn't thought out what the author was going for to do here between the relationships of the characters, like Jake, what Jake wanted, who Jake was in relation, or it's purposely trying to hide the fact that Oliver and Jake are the same person from different universes, because nothing is really referred to here and it acts like it is a completely other thing, not some part of a plan. Maddie is then doing hydrotherapy to try and get answers as to what's happening and why she carved a serial killer while she was in her trance-like state. And as she is floating in the water, here is a taste of some of Chuck Wendig's writing, because he does this a lot in this stupid book. Quote, but so far, she floated. Float, float, floaty, float, float. Pulitzer Prize winning material right there, my guys. She zones out, and we don't get anything here but her getting out of the pod and being told that she was yelling, I remember. So, more keeping secrets from the reader. Do we ever find out what she remembered? The answer to that is no. We never do. Is the author just BSing us the entire time, or do they not know? Nate goes upstairs to check on his son and finds him watching the news, eases him away from it, and then goes to his bedroom once he's got his son sleeping again. His wife is packing a bag. She says that she is only going to go away for a day, not leaving him, she's not divorcing him or running away, and he needs to be okay with it. He's okay with it. Nate is then moping around because he's been alone all day. He thinks that he sees his father's ghost and then talks to the neighbor, Jed, who says that he just might be seeing a ghost, and there are some haunted grounds nearby. He's like, no, not haunted grounds, and then falls asleep. Jake and Ollie are then drinking in the woods, and Jake convinces Ollie that nothing is wrong with him. He should stop listening to his therapist and listen to moi instead. Also, the world is messed up, but you aren't, buddy. You are the King of Kings. Maddie comes back from her trip and won't tell anyone where she went. Maddie then goes to meet Jed and is getting along with him because he's a writer. She knows him. She's a fan. And they talk about how you control art. Quote, are we just vessels for the art? She asked. Doorways? Jed seemed to ponder this. Could be. It could be. But like I said, I think that we control it. I don't think it controls us. The question is, do you really see it as the art or your art? That deserves an answer, or an attempt to find that answer at least. And Jed starts talking about spirits, quote, the Lenape, who once claimed this territory as their own, before we took it from them, had their tales. Most agree that rocks moved as a result of some manner of spirit or god, perhaps Quapawis, the trickster, or maybe it was an act performed by the mischievous little Wematagonis. The spirits of the forest were known for moving things about, sometimes a misplaced tool, sometimes a landmark, so that it became difficult to find your way home. Others in the tribe believed a figure of darkness and death was responsible. Matantu was its name. And here, Jed gave a look to Nate, and they said he slept beneath a boulder field, and then he turned over his troubled dreams that boulders moved. Some said the devil himself fell from the heavens, and he moved the boulders from time to time as a way to confound early settlers in the area, and there's always the more modern spin on a tale, chalking it up to the government conspiracies, magnetic fields, or aliens, given the UFO sightings are considerably higher here than in most parts of the country. The Lenape sold this area to the Penn family. Yes, the family of William Penn, Penn as in Pennsylvania, at the start of 1737 walking purchase, and records show that in 1850 the Penn family in turn sold it to a man named Tiberius Good, though no other records could even confirm the existence of this Mr. Good. All that was known was that his supposed benefactor was very clear at one point. He'd left a mandate in place to ensure that the land could never be developed, nor could the boulders be mined or used for any purpose. They would remain utterly undisturbed. Later, a man named Benjamin Kane Smitherd, a supposed friend of the mysterious Tiberius Good, purchased a 128-acre zone around the 7-acre boulder field. It was also around this time that a pair of bank robbers, the Dowell brothers, Leviticus and Lemuel, came to Ramble Rocks after robbing a bank with the intent of hiding their plundered bank loot in one of the caves around the area. One problem, though, Ramble Rocks had no caves. They were under this mistaken belief that the area was rife with caves, but it was not. Many speculated that they had gotten it confused with the area known as Wolf Rocks, which existed about 20 miles to the south on Buckingham Mountain. Finding no caves, they sought to leave the area, but found themselves confounded how to escape. Though 7 acres is not a particularly large space, the journals of the one brother, Leviticus, indicate that they were trapped there for days, unable to flee. They lost their loot, and eventually they lost one another. Their bodies were discovered only 10 feet apart, even though Leviticus's journal indicates that, at the end of their lives, they had separated and could not find each other. Then, there are the tales of the train tunnel and what happened there. A conductor literally losing his head, the serial killer Edmund Walker Reese snatching up his first victim from within that tunnel, and the girls from around the area. He even killed one of them on the rocks in the Fellsmere. He was fascinated with them. He had detailed maps and drawings, and he said he counted 99 special rocks and felt that the number was somehow sacred or special in a numerological way. He called the boulder field a place of sacrifice, which of course only deepened and darkened the urban legends around the area. The Satanic Panic spun up stories about other acts of ritualized human sacrifices, though none were ever discovered. So are we going with this whole thing is caused by a cursed Indian property, yet another recycled trope? And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with using tropes. It's just like if you don't tell a cohesive story that gives the story its own identity, and when this story is just like a chimera of references and tropes from other places, and dialogue that doesn't make sense, also thrown in random ramblings and rants, and I didn't include most of those in the dialogue shares that I have here, but like, it mentions school shootings so many times. It mentions climate change so many times, just to throw it in there. It mentions men being terrible compared to women and how strong women are so many times. And you could make it a character thing. And I went in with an open mind, being like, you know what, Maddie is just going to be this type of character. I'm not going to judge her for being this type of character, because you're allowed to write any type of character you want in your stories to make the story what it is. But then all the characters sound exactly the same, and all of the characters are pointless, and the conversations don't make sense. And then you want to tell me that Nate is the neglectful parent when you've got mommy over here being like, no, let him have some bad friends. Let him play on the railroad tracks. Like, we all have enough good friends. Let him have some bad ones. Let him make some friends that will diversify his experiences with criminality. That's what I'm saying. A door slams open. The women are startled. Jed, because there are more than one woman standing here. Jed and the men are all like, nah, it's not. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. It's the wind. Meanwhile, Oliver makes up with Caleb and his friends from whatever dispute that they had been having. Jake and all of the others from school are hanging out in the garage. Okay, so what's happening right now is that Fig and his wife Zoe are over, and so is Jed, because it is now Halloween. And so the adults are hanging out in the living room telling ghost stories, and then Oliver and all of his D&D friends are in the basement, and Jake has also shown up to hang out because he was invited. At the door, Nate is attacked by a ghost of his father, getting hit by his dad's pistol whipping him. A bad storm is just booming outside for no apparent reason. Fig and Nate get a message from work saying that there was a security issue that happened at the office and they need to leave. Maddie is worried because the storm is really bad, but the men are going to go out anyway, and they say don't worry about this. And in the garage, Jake produces a gun and thinks that it's funny, and it makes all of Oliver's friends upset. And because Oliver defends Jake pulling the pellet gun out, all of his other friends leave because they're scared. Oliver is angsting about his family and also if he made the right decision in defending Jake against his D&D friends. Fig and Nate are then heading to the fish and game shop. Fig announces that his wife is pregnant at this time. Why? I don't know. It doesn't even add anything to the story. Again, why is this here? Because her being pregnant is nothing. She's hardly in the book at all anyway. It's just, ugh. It feels like now it's just here to have this little rant that I'm going to read for you. Quote, "I'm happy, I'm just..." Fig paused. He gestured like he was trying to be careful with his words, or like he was trying to conjure them from the air. "You ever think with the way the world is, it's irresponsible to bring a kid into it? It's like a fucking president and the climate change and God, what else? Antibiotics are failing and they say all of the bugs are dying and the coral reefs too. Countries are building up their nuclear arsenals instead of paring them down. I'm just... shit. A new kid might be a burden on this world, and this world will sure as hell end up a burden on our kid." As Fig spoke, Nate saw the turnoff from the office ahead through the spitting curtain of ice and snow. He pulled the truck into the parking lot, then let the engine idle for a minute, since the heat had just finally kicked on enough to warm up the truck. I worry about the kind of world I've left for Oliver, but this is the thing that gets me past that most times. I think maybe Ollie is the kid who will help fix it all. Maybe he'll see what's wrong, and he'll take the chance and make a change. A big change, or even a little one that works to make the world better instead of worse. Best I can do is raise him right and not... He was about to say not pass down all of the bad stuff that's in me, but as lightning flashed, he saw something gleaming by the side of the office. So we're never going to confront whatever this bad stuff that is inside of Nate is because he's worried about passing down. It never comes up. But also, can we just have a minute pause that this unborn child is already being considered a burden to the world? How about thinking of your unborn child as a blessing to this world? Like, I get being anxious, but I think that you're already setting yourself up for fail if you're looking at that child as a burden to reality, as a burden to existing. You don't think that that child is going to feel like it knows that you think that it's a burden? It's one thing to just be worried about being able to provide or being worried about what the world might do to the child, or if you'll even be able to raise the child well, because parenthood is hard. But your unborn child as a burden to the world by default, it just is not, it's not nice. Eventually, the two get to the office. They go inside. They see blood and broken glass. And then there's this young girl. She's pale, Oliver's age, with a 37 carved into her cheek. Fig and Nate help her out to the fish and game shop. They don't look for anyone else in there. They don't show any signs of Nate being a cop and, what it might look like to want to clear the area, to be careful, to have himself prepared for some sort of altercation, to try not to disturb the scene, to follow any signs of somebody in there. Like, there is nothing that points out to him being a cop and investigating this area. They decide that they're going to take her to the hospital, and outside there are flashes of lightning. Nate can't see Fig in all of the storm, but a man appears saying that that girl is his. It appears that Edmund Reist, a ghost, is now here. When lightning flashes again, Edmund and that girl are gone. At the house, Jed's over there with Zoe and Maddie, telling them spooky stories and saying that maybe the killer Reese was doing things for a righteous reason because he also studied the end of the world myths and Armageddon. He then tells the women that it's not his job to judge people for their choices. He just writes them down. Meanwhile, Jake is angsting about whether or not he trusts Jake and is thinking, quote, "Jake was rough and raw, a bit of a punk, but a prick. But he was also unafraid. He seemed to move through the world without a single care to slow him down." And that Oliver found fascinating, though it did little to answer the question of trust. It was hard to deny that he found the other boy captivating in a way that he couldn't describe. Not in a romantic way. He didn't love him, wasn't attracted to him, and some part of him thought that even considering that felt strange, as if he was asking himself if he was attracted to a cousin or a brother, because that's how Jake felt, like a brother, more than a friend, or different, at least, a brother. One who'd saved Oliver when Alex Amati wanted to kill him, and one who had told him what seemed like the unvarnished, if unpleasant, truth about things. What a weird aside to have. Like, you can have feelings for somebody, friendship feelings, close feelings, familial feelings, without having to be like, I like them a lot, but am I attracted to them? That there are more valuable relationships people can have than romantic ones. But it seems like a lot of relationships in general get boiled down to, if you're not banging them, then it's pointless. Jake asks him to follow him in the middle of the storm, and for some reason, Oliver agrees to go out there with him. They get lost in the woods. He gets some visions from the Book of Accidents. All of them are bad things like bullying and school shootings and bombing of a wedding in the Middle East. And then he's crying when his mom comes out of nowhere through the storm, the snow and the hail and the rain, and finds him on the ground sobbing. And so Nate was struck when Edmund was around at the store, and now he's gotten medical attention with some antibiotics for the deep gash that's in his forehead. That's not going to amount to anything either. It's not going to disrupt his future parts in the story. They didn't file any sort of report about this either, about this break-in. They didn't search the break-in. They didn't get the police involved at all. Deputy Chief State of the Police, John Contrino, shows up, and Nate asks if the guy has talked to his partner, Fig, about the situation. It's actually why John was here, to get clarification on what exactly happened at the shop. Quote, Nate had been police. They weren't equipped to deal with reports that didn't add up. They mostly treated those kinds of stories with disdain and mockery, or worse, roughed their tellers up, maybe shot them if they weren't white. So this is a kind of quote that makes me believe the author just doesn't like that occupation, which, whatever, have your feelings about whatever you want to have feelings about. However, Nate was a cop, and I'm getting pretty sick of authors picking subjects for their stories when they don't need to pick those subjects for their stories, when they only have disdain for those things. Cops deal with stuff that don't make sense, that don't add up all the time. Cops and detectives are supposed to make sure that the stories match up and to find the truth behind whatever actually happened, because when people cause issues or when people are embarrassed, they lie. So they deal a lot with things that don't add up. Making them add up is part of the job. So yet again, another example of how this author just says stuff that is nonsense, but then like, oh yeah, when they run into people, they just like rough them up or shoot them if they're not white. Okay, mister, just using your entire story to just... There is no story. Let's just fix this. Okay, this is knockoff tropes of things that this has seen in other places mixed with personal political rants. And if that's what you want to do, fine, but don't sell it to me as a story, okay? What a waste of time. Don't make your main character a cop from Philadelphia if you're not going to act like they're a freaking cop. Nate doesn't have to like the other police, and he can even have a rivalry between like the cops from the city versus the cops from the rural areas, and he can even have bad feelings because he's seen all of the corruption from other cops in the city. But to be this blatantly ignorant about something that you chose as a character trait is so bad as a professional writer. What are you doing? I would call this unprofessional. And I know that we don't really question professionalism, but it's about as unprofessional as coming into your office in your birthday suit. You're doing not even the bare minimum required for the occupation you slap on yourself and then ask people to pay you for. Nate is short-tempered with John, seemingly also hates cops. Quote, this incident, how you got cut across your melon there? Oh, that. He quickly summoned to life. That girl, she pushed past me. I slipped on a patch of ice. Must have hit a rock or a branch or something. Uh-huh. Nurse said your injury was consistent with a blade. Goddamn cops, Nate thought. Contrino didn't seem like a good guy, but he seemed like a good cop at least, doing his due diligence. You think that a cop wouldn't recognize what a knife wound looks like versus accidentally slipping on a rock? There is nothing about John that makes him come off as a bad guy, and what we're going to learn later here is that it's already just assuming he's a bad guy because the author knows that he's a bad guy, and so it's just preemptively having bad vibes about him so that he can be like, yeah, I was right, later. John accepts Nate's story as he tells it and then leaves. When Nate gets back to the house, Maddie is saying that Ollie was worried and that they both said they need to talk. Quote, and then they talked. I'm just giving you examples of how little effort was put into this, so, sorry. I told you I was spicy about this, and when I see this little effort put in here, there is such a thing as big effort put into things that I didn't like, or things that didn't necessarily jive with me. Like, I can say that Sam Fenna's work had a lot of effort put into it. I can say that the Bringer of Light had so much effort put into this. This feels like zero effort was put into it. Now we get an interlude that explains where Maddie had gone all of those chapters ago, which was to visit this random girl named Sissy, who has a scar number 5 on her cheek. And that is a girl that got away from the serial killer Edmund. And you'll realize that he was going after a girl with a 37 on his cheek, her cheek earlier, but this is a number 5. So like how he got to 37 when 5 got away, and it was 5's fault that he got given the chair. I guess these last couple of decades, he's just still been killing, but really hasn't been killing that quickly. I mean, Edmund is letting the demon down a little bit. And it apparently happened because Maddie had heard her dad talking about this case, and then she had created this creature called the Boxman that had come to life, much like her other sculptures. And the Boxman went and helped guide Sissy out of the situation she was in and helped her escape. And so obviously the statues and the art coming to life is something that's been following her all of this time, but it's never acknowledged. It's never talked about. Are we supposed to expect that it only happened at this point when she was a child, and then with the owl, and then with the Edmund Reese statue she randomly made? And why did she randomly go into a trance to make an Edmund statue? Again, that just feels like something that was done for the creep factor and to like inspired by somewhere, but it is literally nothing. And this whole statue thing is also literally nothing. It comes to nothing. After talking to Sissy, Maddie is telling Nate what she had learned at that time when her dad was the cop involved in the case. So not only do you have Nate's dad was the executioner, but you have Maddie's dad was a cop involved in the case. What a coincidence. They agree that they are both proud of each other for pursuing answers on this, and it is a max aphrodisiac to Nate, so they just get their sexual prowess going on, which is enough to power a village and even compete with the sexual energy of Faye that can move a mountain. Quote, she kissed his cheek, then his lips, then his jawline. The next thing they knew, they were ripping each other out of their clothes, and they were doing something that people only seem to do in movies. They fucked on the dining room table, him on top of her, then flipped, stirring up the kind of energy that hadn't stirring up the kind of energy they hadn't summoned since before Oliver was born, the kind of energy that could power a mountain village for the better part of a year, the kind of energy that reminded them both of their love that was vigorous and eternal, lust slick and heartstrong, as bright as a starlight, as stout as thunder, and dirtier than a gas station bathroom. Calm down, Chuck. Calm down. Nate and Maddie then decide to keep everything a secret from Oliver, everything they've discovered about what's going on from Oliver, because they don't want to stress him out more, especially because he's super empathetic. In case you're wondering how convoluted and unfocused this story is, let me tell you, quote, hey honey, how was your day at school? I'm making chili for dinner. By the way, my art comes alive, and also there's a supposedly dead serial killer who is somehow back. Oh, and also your father has been literally fighting ghosts of your grandfather. Do you have any homework? Is any of that going to matter in the future? No, it's not. Nate is going to fight the serial killer man and kill him in the end, but what's it have to do with anything? It doesn't. Because we've got the whole multiverse Armageddon thing with Jake, not Ollie, going on as well. Oliver almost gets beat up by the bullies again, but instead he makes up with Caleb and they scare the bullies off with threats of videoing him kicking their asses so that he would get kicked off the ball team. However, Ollie still needs to see Jake. He goes to his house at the trailer park, but can't find him. When he's leaving, he and Caleb see Jake with the neighbor, Jed. Caleb warns Ollie about going with Jake because Jake is dangerous, but Ollie goes anyway, and Caleb walks off because he's not going to be involved in this. In his house, Jake tells Ollie about how magic is real and he can jump between dimensions, quantum realities, the like. Ollie thinks that Jake is messing with him and sees that he is going to leave, but because the story needs to go somewhere, it doesn't let Ollie just walk out, and he sticks around to be like, okay, what else do you have to show me? I want to know everything that you can show me. Show it to me now. Jake shows Ollie the Book of Accidents and convinces him about parallel realities while still trying to get Ollie on his side and alienate him from his family. Quote, the world is fucking broken, man. Everything is falling apart. You felt it. I know you have. You know what entropy is? Of course I do. He'd always loved the idea of entropy. All of the world and all of its systems were constantly drifting towards chaos, a descent. But life, as Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, found a way, and it responded by fighting entropy with birth and growth. Even when something did decay, a tree falls, let's say, an animal might find shelter in it, or use it to hide, or mushrooms would grow on its surface, and the tree would eventually yield all its nutrients back to the soil, where other trees would gain from it. This gave him a lot of hope. Entropy was persistent, but so was the natural world's efforts to counter it. Welp, entropy's winning. School shootings, terrorism, serial killers, bigotry and abuse, sex trafficking, human slavery, cop killing. Do things seem normal to you? I don't know. His pulse quickened. Keep it together, Ollie. They're not normal, but my dad always says that every generation has its challenges, from Hitler to Nixon to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, and your dad was a cop, wasn't he? Like he knows anything about anything. Why you gotta see a therapist? I bet it's his fault. I bet his father beat his ass and now he beats your ass, or diddles you, or puts you in a dress. Jake is obsessed with saying that people are diddling Ollie, by the way. But also, I would just like it to take a minute here to get into how this story is saying the world is showing entropy through sex trafficking, bigotry, abuse, terrorism, serial killers, human slavery, as if these things haven't always existed in humankind. I mean, even if you go back to, with biblically speaking, the first generation after Adam and Eve with Cain and Abel gave us the first murderer. And if you don't believe in that, you can still look at the history of humanity in general. Are you trying to tell me that in the first of the humans to have existed in ancient BC times, there was not human trafficking, slavery, rape, abuse, bigotry, war, Helen of Troy? Can we, like, the Greeks and the Romans didn't hate each other? Like, the Greek gods aren't full of drama? Like, it's just business as usual. So I don't get what it's trying to say here with all of these terrible things exist, which proves that the world is failing to entropy. Jake says that Ollie's world is going the way of all of the other worlds. It's dying, but they can save it. Ollie doesn't believe him at this point and then leaves. Jake talks with the demon leader that he worships or has gotten his deal with about how he's going to get Oliver to do what they need, but he couldn't get Oliver to just budge on his thoughts. Nate goes to Jed and asks for help in tracking down the supernatural business that's going on, since Jed is the master of all of this. Flashback to Nate and Maddie getting married. She's emotionally cheated on him with some guy from art school after they've already been married and had a kid. Nate gets mad and punches a wall. He assures her that he is not mad at her. He is just upset and embarrassed, and she calls him abusive adjacent for that, and if he does it again, she's going to leave. I don't know why we needed this chapter even. It was so pointless. Nate's then going to work with Jed about Ramble Rock, because that's the place where all of the discoveries are, where all the ghost stories are, where the tunnel is, and so it's possible that's where the portal is. Nate is going to have an emotional moment now, but Jed talks him down from it with the best that we can do now is find a way to move forward. So don't get emotional, just find a way to move forward. The emotional moment ends very abruptly to the point that it's like, why did you even bring it up? Jake and Jeb then team up to send Nate to the broken world that he left behind, because the big thing that they want to do is separate Nate from Oliver, because Oliver is strong with his family around. And they're like, well, if we get rid of part of his family, specifically his father, who is very defensive of him, then Oliver will be easier to manipulate, because we can promise him that he can get back his dad if he just does what we say. So that's going to happen. And for some reason, I say for some reason, but it's because Jake lied to Jeb that if Jeb helped him, then he could get his family back, and his family, which is his wife and daughter, died in a car accident. That was actually Jeb's fault. That is why Jed is so full of guilt and says that he is a bad man. Then we get another interlude that is some long mental thing where our mental projection named Eli convinces Oliver to kill himself, and he does, and now he gets to see the future. It was pretty nonsensical for me in the grand scheme of things. Fig and Maddie are then talking about Nate's disappearance and agree to go looking for him at the Boulder Rock together. Jake is continuing to manipulate Jed into helping him with the multiverse stuff and believes that Nate can't be a better person in this universe because he's been trash in every other universe that Jake has ever been into. Oliver wants to use the Book of Accidents to look for his dad and get him back. Jake is over here creaming himself over manipulating Oliver into helping him. We have no answers. This isn't suspense. For me, it was just reading cheap. Maddie and Fig discover Jed's boot prints at the boulder point, and Maddie thanks her wooden owl for pointing her in the direction. So it was just a plot device to lead them whenever they needed it. Maddie is now sussy that Jed is lying to them. Maddie's in Jed's house looking for hints since Jed isn't there to yell at for making her husband disappear. Then she texts Oliver because she's worried about him, says that she has been neglecting him since she's been looking for dad. I don't know how long it's been since the last time we had any sort of time check-in. It was Halloween, and this doesn't feel like it's much far after that. So like, how long had she really been neglecting him for? It's been like a week, maybe, if that. There's really been no establishing of time or period or passage of time or these people not interacting. Like, we really haven't seen it. And Oliver has been doing his own thing too. So it's not like maybe she should be noticing that her son is also missing. It's not just her ignoring him. Maddie gets worried when Oliver is not responding to her text messages anymore. Also note she has a pistol from Nate's collection. Oliver sees a vision of his dad by using the Book of Accidents. Jake tells him, nah, your dad is dead, dead, dead. Don't chase after it. Give up. Oliver refuses, and now Oliver is starting to feel anger underneath Jake's actions. Only starting to feel angry with Jake, though. Oliver should grow backbone at some point, but he doesn't. Jake's frustrated. His choices aren't working to manipulate Oliver. He grabs a knife to stab him anyway, and Oliver is apparently unable to notice that he's being stalked. If Jake can just stab him on the murder rock and end the multiverse, why doesn't he do that? Why does he need consent from Oliver about anything? Maddie is stalking Jed at a hotel, trying to get a chance to talk to him. And then we go back to Oliver, who is running into one of the sports bullies, Graham, and he is super mad. His hand is all busted up. He can't do sports like he wants to do. And he is taunting Ollie until they touch because they're going to fight. And Ollie sucks all of the bad vibes out of Graham because that's suddenly something he can do now. And this fight moment turns into a random therapy session. Quote, It's not cool. I knew that he was missing and I couldn't see past my own bullshit to be nice to you for 5 minutes about it. And I said something awful to you. Like, I was happy to hurt you. God, that's fucked up. What was wrong with me? He eased up next to the house and left the engine idling. We all have bullshit to deal with, Oliver said. Yeah, but this was something else. Pains like a parasite, pain that was given to him. Oliver decided to take the risk and said, I'm sorry about your dad, too. I don't think that he is very good to you, Graham. Yeah, Graham tapped the steering wheel with his index finger and thumb, a little distracted drumbeat. My father is not a good guy, and I think that I've always known that, but I also think I convinced myself otherwise, that he was some kind of hero. Truth is, I think he's a failure himself, didn't live up to his own standards, or maybe the standards of my grandfather, and so now he's putting all of his weight, that pressure on me, because it's easier for him to push it off on me. Does that make sense? God, it sounds like it makes sense. I'm talking a lot. I feel like I'm high. I don't think that you're high, Oliver shrugged. I think that maybe you're just having a moment of clarity. Yeah, it's definitely clarity, but it's more than a moment. Maybe it's good. Graham finally turned to him. You did this to me. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's okay. You sure? Graham smiled. Yeah. I'm better than okay. I feel good. Like you said, clear. Whatever you did, it was something special, man. I feel like I just had a splinter taken out of me. You're a weird kid, Oliver. I'm sorry that I made your life kind of shitty. It was okay. It's all worked out. I'm really sorry about your hand, and I hope that it doesn't impact your future. Maybe you were right. I can't play ball forever. I think that I'm just mad about things in my life that I don't control, and that not getting to play baseball means that I didn't know who I even was anymore. And with my father breathing down my neck and calling me dummy and beating on me, I wanted to control something, and so I guess that I chose to punish you instead of owning my own problems. A sign of my power at a time when I felt I had none. And I think I'm saying all of my thoughts out loud. Again, am I high? Is this therapy? This feels like therapy. He laughed and craned his head back. Oh, fuck, Oliver. This is weird. Yeah, it is weird for me too, Oliver thought. Thanks, Oliver said. I hope that you find your dad. Me too, I miss him. I bet you do. A sad look settled on Graham's face. I miss mine too. He was okay once upon a time, or maybe I just hadn't seen who he really was. What happens now? Between you and me? I don't know. I'm not gonna let him keep doing what he's doing. which will be hard, but I have to own up to that and make a change. As for you and me, like, what is this conversation? It is so fake. It is so inappropriate. It is so on the nose. It feels like somebody that read WebMD about therapy and was like, let me write it into this story. And then the repetition of exercising as Ollie wants to eat himself into a coma. Quote, no, not something. He took his pain, not all of the way, but he pulled something out of him, like a cancer that was exorcised. It left some part of him behind, some healthy part, or healthy pain maybe, pain that looked like everybody else's. But the multiplicative, consumptive pain that was in him, it acted like a poison, or a disease, and Oliver took it out, a bloodletting to let out the rotten, sick blood. The Book of Accidents. What had it told him? To kill the cancer, cut out the cancer, to stop the pain, end the pain, break the wheel, remake the wheel. And he also wants to use this ability to heal his dad's pain. What is the Book of Accidents? We don't get any lore on the Book of Accidents, by the way. It says like it was a book about accidents that happened at Boulder's Rock, whatever, but we don't actually talk about any of the accidents that happened at Boulder's Rock, or how it's a magic book, or where the magic came from, or why it told him that he needed to break the wheel. Like, does the Book of Accidents just tell you what you want to see, or does it try to manipulate you? Does it belong to the deep? Like, what is it? Oliver then gets to school and he learns that Graham, painless man, killed his father and then killed himself. And the fact that he killed his dad and himself has everyone making rumors that he was sexually abused and pimped out by his dad, something that this book is constantly obsessed with describing. I'm just throwing in, it just feels like it's throwing in more regurgitated unoriginality as we go. Maddie is tailing Jeb and catches up to him trying to kill himself. After her initial yeah bitch die moment where she's like, I don't care if you die, I freaking hate you. Pull the trigger! She's like, wait a second. Actually, I need answers from you, so probably don't pull the trigger. So, what, he doesn't have a trigger. He's trying to hang himself. So she, like, runs into him so that he falls off the chair and then fights him and then makes him not kill himself. Meanwhile, Ollie is telling Jake about Graham's death, and Jake is like, nah, this is a good thing. The conversation goes like this, quote, Jake stood and then blocked Oliver's frantic pacing. Listen, you did the best thing for him. Graham was fucked up, and he was made fucked up by an even more fucked up father, a guy who beat on him and called him names and held him to impossible standards. Guys like him are never gonna be anything more than a bully, a serial predator, a rapist, a wife beater. Now they're both gone. I just don't feel like the author understands these kinds of situations. You get what I mean when I'm like, this feels like he doesn't have any empathy or understanding or compassion for any of these things that he's throwing in these books, and is doing the bare minimum for online therapy talk. Like, oh yeah, murder-suicide is chill because that guy called him names and had impossible standards. Yeah, that's what, I mean, not that murder-suicides haven't happened because somebody lied to their parents about going to school for 4 years and now the lie was coming out and the only option was to kill your parents because you lied to them for 4 years. Not as if that hasn't happened, but like, this doesn't build any credibility with itself to get me to go along with it. Oliver is very confused by the way that Jake is acting. Jed is over here, gun pointed at him by Maddie, and he just starts spilling that Jake is a bad person, all of his involvement of like what Jake has been having him do, that Ned has hit the in-between worlds. So yeah, we're just getting more and more arbitrary with everything. Jake tells Ollie that he can get back his dad and Graham by going with him to wherever he wants to go and making a sacrifice, doing a deal as he sees fit. Jake inner monologues about how he nearly messed this all up with Oliver by killing Graham and his dad, because truth be told, he was the one that killed Graham and his dad. They didn't murder-suicide. But Ollie is falling right into the trick, and it's all going to be okay. Jake brought Oliver to the sacrificial altar slab that's in the woods. Oliver figures this out, sees Jake and a bunch of other Olivers that Jake has actually met. This scene ends, and then it goes into Jed ranting. Quote, the room spun around Maddie. Tinnitus rang in her ears like a dial tone. Jed was talking, even as she stood above him, trying like hell not to hyperventilate or fall down or pull the trigger or put a bullet through the bullseye that she imagined on his forehead. Human sacrifice has power, he said. The world has long understood that, and now it pretends to know differently. Oh, we're all so buttoned up, pretending we don't do these things anymore, even though we sacrifice the homeless on the cold streets, or migrant children at the border, or the poor at every turn. Stop talking, she said in a small voice, but he didn't. He was lost to it, lost in the throes of what he was saying in Japan. It was Hitobashira, women and children buried in the foundations of the buildings in order to afford them mystical protections. Retainers were sacrificed alongside their dying pharaohs, and Mesoamerican chiefs and Mongol warlords. Many went willing. The Lindo man, bound and drowned in bog without any fight, all to meet some ancient pact with the gods. The power was the blood, you see, the blood, as with the Turobolium of the cult of Cybele, where one would stand beneath a bull as it was sacrificed to let the blood rain fountain upon him. Not always a bull, too, if your sordid histories are to be believed. Shades of Elizabeth Bathory there. And, of course, there's the binding of Isaac, lest we believe our own God. Jed's working with Jake. At the end of the day, Jed's working with Jake, believing if they in this world, then they can start a new one and fix everything that is wrong that God created broken, because that's what they believe. I don't know how ending the world comes with this, but then again, we're not dealing with rational people. We're dealing with, I think it's a factory reset if you just create Armageddon, and so obviously they're insane. Because Jake can't get Ollie to do things his way, he's just going to force it, which I don't know why he didn't force it to begin with, since nobody else in the story who's a murderer seems to have issues with force. Kind of goes along with the occupation. Quote, Jake's head rocked back on his neck, and he pressed his fists into his eyes as if frustrated. It's my fault, really. I thought I understood you. But you don't care that the world is fucked up. You just care about people. And I can't do anything with that. I need you to see the forest, and all you see is the fucking trees. So, I guess I'm gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way. If someone cares about people, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that mean that they care about the world? I don't know, man. The dialogue in this just doesn't feel right. It feels like it is written in order to try to make points about certain things and in order to have the villains say certain things, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. There's a flashback interlude to just show Jake being abused by his dad that actually offended me on a visceral level because it wants so much to be Casey and Casey's dad, but it's not. It's just forced and it feels beyond cheap just because of how the author writes trauma, and it seems a throwaway. It also just seems like the author over relies on, well, let me show you the bad things that happen in order to create a bad person. In case you needed an example of how this is a rant and not a story, Oliver's empathy is just used to do paragraphs like this over and over again. Quote, the images came faster and faster. Animals dead and rotting in a field. Flies on a dead girl's face. Thin, sick captives in ragged pajamas pressed against the wire at a concentration camp. Men in ditches trampled by men on horseback. A soldier in the trenches struggled to shove a gas mask on his face as his skin bubbled and his eyes ran like egg yolks down his face. Starving children, bellies swollen. Women loaded into vans with sacks over their heads. Machine gun fired at concerts, barely audible over the music. People in the crowds going down one by one. Little arcs of blood spraying up with each hit to the head. Bang, 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 bang. A hallway at a high school full of dead kids, shot kids. A sick little girl dead in a tangle of barbed wire at the border. War, disease, starvation, torture, death. Oliver watched it all because he could not look away, and he was not sure how long it went on. Maybe a few minutes, maybe weeks, maybe years. He felt filled up by it, like it was a living thing, a series of images made into a serpent that wound its way around his neck before pushing into his mouth, choking him. He cried but made no sound, and the tears did little to hide what he saw, did nothing to blur them out, like they were somehow delivered to him in a way that was not entirely visual, but like they were pictures hammered into the wall of his mind with bent, rusted nails. It's so dramatic. Jake gets Oliver to help him kill his dad in this memory, Jake's abusive dad, and now he has the power of the Book of Accidents. With the book trying to be creepy, we now have Nate who wakes up in this twisted, abandoned theme park being snuck on and attacked by a clown and someone in a bunny mask, and this is so out of left field that it's, what are we doing here? One of the people here is Edmund the killer, now saying that he is going to make Nate one of his friends like all of the others. I didn't know that Edmund had a posse. As the scene is written, I could just imagine the author holding to himself, giggling as he's writing it, thinking that it's something. Maddie finds Oliver and they go back to Fig, who they tell everything, and he offers them a cabin in the woods to hide in after saying that they should definitely tell the feds about this multi-universe stuff, but he doesn't know how they're gonna fix it, but they should definitely hide. Meanwhile, in the in-between dimensions, Nate is meeting a mirror version of his dad in a house. His not dad tells Nate about the parallel Armageddon, and all of these worlds are falling apart because Jake Oliver is from a different dimension. So it's because of this other perspective that we know Jake Oliver and Jed are not just insane, because now we have a third person who is not really considered part of this whole destroy the universe, destroy the multiverse thing, confirming that the multiverse is legitimate. So the Armageddon, destroy the multiverse, is apparently legitimate because we've got another perspective supporting it. Nate eventually figures out that he might be able to escape through the stone slab in the tunnel, because that was also a bridge mentioned in previous stories, like with Jed. And also because despite the different dimension changing, like that one specific place constantly changes to look like something else. And so clearly there is a magical element going on there. Carl invites Nate to stay here and live here in this dimension. And Nate is like, no, I don't want to. I want to get back to my family. My family needs me. I need my family. And so then Carl gets really, really pissy, and you get this king of poetry sessions right here. Quote, fuck you. Yeah, fuck me for sure. Because he's really mad now that Nate doesn't want to stay here. You just met him. Maybe take him on a date first. Not dad. Nate goes into the tunnel, which is like a roller coaster ride tunnel, and he sees clowns everywhere, and Edmund Reese shows up saying that he was killing young girls in an attempt to please a demon who said that if he killed 99 girls, he would become a god, and then he would never have anybody say no to him ever again. And this all happened in this famous tunnel because Edmund, apparently all of these times, kept trying to hit on young girls and young boys, as I'm assuming a teenager, as a young boy or girl, and they all kept saying no. And so he doesn't want girls and boys and men and women and whoever he wants to say, I'm assuming girls, because he's just killing the little girls. But he doesn't want anybody to be able to say no anymore. So what does this have to do with anything? How does it tie into anything? He's just there. He's just complicating the multiverse. Oh my gosh. Also the clown aesthetics. Like, what the frick? Nate gets attacked by random clowns because clowns are spooky, I guess. That's how it feels. He is then surrounded by dead versions of all of his sons, gets pulled out of the tunnel by Not Dad Carl, and then Not Dad gets shocked by lightning and disappears. Maddie and Nate eat a turkey dinner, and carve wooden owls just hanging out, having a good time at the cabin. Maddie gets shit-faced and has an epiphany about how she can bring her husband back. Not Dad, Carl, and Nate trade trauma in a pointless exchange of trauma dumping at chapter 72. Maddie goes to Walmart and complains about how everyone at Walmart sucks and is miserable, which when you... whatever, she hates capitalism, but maybe complain about Walmart instead of how gross all the people are because they are lower class than you. Ollie is at the cabin by himself, being taunted by Jake in the TV because Jake is upset that Ollie didn't follow through on sacrificing himself, and so now he's got Caleb and is saying, you need to come here and kill yourself, or else I'm going to kill Caleb, and then I'm going to kill your other D&D friends, and then I'm going to kill and torture your mom, so come here, kill the multiverse for me, and then I won't have to kill your friends. And you get this bogus dialogue. Game over. I won. I almost had you, didn't I? Give me an ego boost, Ollie. Tell me I was at least close. You never were close, Oliver lied. Whatever helps you sleep at night, kid. Also, these characters all talk the same. So many, like Mom calls him kid in the same way. That guy calls him kid. Nate calls him kid. There's no difference, which again makes the voices just homogenized so there's no character. And bad guy over here is begging Oliver for affirmation because he really needs it. When Oliver agrees to go to Jake, you get, quote, of course I know where you are. Could I come and get you? Sure, but this is less work for me. Don't hurt Caleb more than you have to. Jake smiled. You love him? Like, got a thing for him? You seem like you like boys and girls, both. A little Caleb, a little Hina. Maybe after Caleb, I'll go after Hina. Okay, again, we've got this repetition that if you like somebody, then you must have romantic feelings for them. Number two, why are we qualifying this with don't hurt him more than you have to? Just say, don't hurt him, I'm coming to you. Like, once Oliver is off to go find his way to Jake, Nate is in the other dimension struggling with Not Dad Carl as Not Dad dies because he's got an illness. And Nate is like, but he was actually nice. Like, my dad was a piece of shit, and I couldn't wait for him to die, and I was glad that he died. And now I've got this not bad Carl dad, and I can't do anything to save him. He's just going to die. I hate this. Nate is then fighting Reese randomly in the rain because Edmund Reese just shows up when he shows up. I don't really know. But during this storm and this fight scene with this killer, you've got this quote going on. Then Nate turned around and stared up as lightning laced the corset of the sky. The rain fell harder. He felt like a turkey looking up at the storm. Wasn't that what they said turkeys did? Stare up at the rain, beaks open, drowning themselves? Probably an urban legend, but that's how he felt, like a dumb turkey, drowning himself in the rain. This is why I believe we need to put jars on Chuck's hands. We need to save him from himself, but more importantly, we need to save ourselves from any more of this. Nobody should be cursed to read this text anymore. Any new ideas, which are not new ideas, but any new books that pretend to be new ideas, we need to be rescued. Fig is then pursuing Jake and Ollie against his pregnant wife's wishes, saying that he couldn't look his child in the eye if he didn't do this. Even if he is likely to die, he would rather abandon his wife and unborn child than abandon his pride for safety so that he could take care of his wife in the future. He's not even a cop. Oliver is getting ready to make a decision. Quote, moreover, he did not care because he had no intentions of letting this world go. It contained too much that he loved. Broken as this machine may be, it was his machine, and it was his mother and his friends and their mothers and their fathers and all of the good people and broken people who needed fixing and the bad people who could be made better. Oliver cared nothing about this cosmic battle. He cared only about the people who had to fight it. Oh, that's like the first mention of some cosmic battle. What cosmic battle are we talking about? Oh my gosh. Oliver removes the pain from Jed's body because apparently we didn't do this from the first. If you thought that, like, Oliver looked at Jed earlier and was like, he's in pain, No, there was no inkling of the pain, even though Jed was like, I'm a bad person, don't like me. Oliver didn't. And it actually would have made more sense if Oliver pulled that out and then Jed offered, like, what bothered him instead of it being offered at gunpoint after he tried to kill himself. So this thing that all of this pain that Oliver takes out of Jed turns into a monster who is defeated. Fig survives after being stabbed. Nate's still gone. Maddie becomes Fig's child's godmother. Jake says, quote, I want to go out there in the world and maybe try to help people, see if I can take some of the bad stuff out of them. Excise their pain. Yeah, dude. You know that some people want their pain, right? Maybe even need it. Pain is a part of who we are. You can't destroy it and you can't hide from it. We've all learned that too well, she thought. It's like Jake. You took something from him, and better or worse, he needed it. So another story that's just like life is about suffering and pain. Super deep philosophy that's never been thought of before, bro. Ollie wants to go out into the world and strip people of their pain, and Maddie is trying to make portals that will bring Nate back to their dimension, because the multi-dimension isn't just Jake being insane. Meanwhile, in the epilogue, Nate is going through multiple dimensions, space and time in order to find Edmund and kill him for realsies, because he just keeps skipping town. So, yes. And Nate does find him and stab him for real, and I don't know why this is where we ended, because Edmund had nothing to do with the actual plot. He was just an accessory, a misdirect. Am I missing something here? That's the end of the story, though, you guys. So, looking forward to what you think all of this is. But a disaster. This book is called the Book of Accidents when it should be called the Book of Disaster. Because it is. The Book of Embarrassment. The book that ended Chuck Wendig's career. And this is where we are. Sorry. I'm sorry. I feel spicy. Anyway, getting to the genre, it's adult, pretends to be a supernatural thriller. It is definitely not a horror to me, but it had the opportunities to go there, and it didn't. It had a subtle fantasy vibe. It was parading around as something, but it was never anything. And then the throwaway attempts at trying to be funny heavily weakened the tension of any horror, as it just left me rolling my eyes more than often, and also made the characters sound homogenous. The hook. The first 50 pages of this novel felt strong. This was not only introduction to magic and a killer element through these two prologues, which I also think handled it well in being kept short rather than 10% of the book in total, but between the death of Edmund and the young boy that appears immediately after those mysterious circumstances, there is this vibe of something strange going on, of consciousness moving, of transferring of the woods or the tunnel being haunted, since that was back with the tunnel, so that came back in. Then after you have the prologues, you have an excellent introduction to Maddie, Oliver, and Nate individually, showing them as a family, but also their individual struggles. Oliver with school particularly because he is a psychic empath, Nate with his father who is abusive and who is dying, and that's going to move them into the house that he doesn't want to be in because it carries so much baggage, and then his wife because the circumstances of her work and her son trying to get her art back together, and something strange is going on. And then Maddie, who of course is worried about her son. Her art side doesn't really come into anything, but you are introduced to her art. By the time you hit the end of the first 50 pages, there's a lot of momentum with having gotten to the house, the character dynamics where the family has might butt heads, because you see where there's difference and the stress that comes along with moving into this trauma house that Nate has bad feelings about, bad memories about, and feels like he's still living under his father, even though his father is dead. That creates a great dynamic that they're going to have to work through as a family. And then with the interlude that has the squirrel in the tunnel, the story made it clear that this book was going to use animals, or at least it suggested it was going to use animals. But looking back, I have no idea why we needed the squirrel perspective and the squirrel jumping dimensions or whatever that was. Going into the language and the writing, at first you could call the writing fast-paced, but it quickly fell away. The opening was much faster than the rest of the book, but as it was going on and doing what it was doing, the pace definitely ended up feeling more like a movie with short scenes and hiding camera angles here and there from the reader. However, I don't think that this story is helped by the back and forth short scenes all of the time that is happening between the characters, and just like all of these cut breaks that are very common if you watch a movie. Because I don't know if you know this, but it's a new scene every time the camera angle like changes. When you're writing a script, or when a room changes, it's not the camera angle, it's the rooms. So like somebody can be in the kitchen and then they just walk into the living room and now you've got a scene break. And if you go and you watch a movie for every time and make time counters every time a scene changes, most of your scenes are going to be between 2 or 3 minutes long, and you will really notice. I did this when I was studying a couple of movies to write a movie script, and I was like, there were so many notes because the scenes are so short. Possibly why I notice it so much when I'm reading these two. I don't know if other people notice it, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm some sort of special, because I'm not. It had the same thing going on like Will Jordan's book, Dark Harvest, which also kept doing short things to cut back and forth, which again felt like movie angles coming back and forth. And also I tried to do that for suspense purposes rather than seeing out a scene. And you can create suspense without blue balling scenes constantly. We also have pointless short chapters that do absolutely nothing, like the eating a turkey. Another symptom of this story not being fully developed is that there was no narrative voice. It's just the author talking through the narration most of the time. At least that's what it felt like. And at times talking down to the reader and the characters. I don't know why this book is as long as it is. It seems like some of the chapters didn't know what they were trying to do with themselves. A lot of the writing was repetitive and didn't help. Quote, in, out, meditative breathing, this whole fucking thing where they imagine a balloon blowing up, and then slowly deflating down. Don't pop the balloon, she thought. Don't pop the balloon. Christ, she almost popped the balloon, an imaginary balloon, and she almost popped it. Shit. She tried to clear her mind and just let it be a formative space, a blank black canvas into which she released something raw, something generative. That feels like something you write when you're brain blocked and you're just trying to write anything in order to get the juices going. Then you've got swearing and vulgarity as the jokes constantly being in this stuff. Quote, she'd had a plan this morning, but it had gone all fuck-shaped. I don't know. Some people just like that as humor. It's not my humor. That's not to say I don't appreciate stories that have swearing in them. Tropic Thunder is one of my favorite movies, but like, this does not use swearing effectively. And sometimes the narrator comes off as patronizing and condescending, as I said. For an example of the narrative coming off as condescending and patronizing, quote, the power was out inside the office. Even still, Nate did the all too human and yet so useless thing of flipping the switches 3 or 4 times just to see. And then you've got situations that feel like it's the author going, it's not just scary, believe me, it's like really, really freaking scary. Quote, Yes, a broken window and blood on the carpet were both indicators that something wasn't right. But again came that feeling that something was really, truly wrong. Wrong in a way that went beyond this moment and into something deeper. You're a cop. This is from Nate's perspective. When Nate went into that store with the blood and the broken windows and the message on the phone, and this was an odd thing to even happen in the rural area, and he's like, well, yeah, it's a sign that something's wrong. But something feels like really, really wrong. I feel like I know what you're trying to say here, but this is not the way to say it. And then this guy is a cop. Key in on cop behavior just a little bit more. This book also has a tendency to feel like it's repeating things that it saw somewhere else, from its references to Legend of Zelda, Magic the Gathering, D&D, Avatar, The Last Airbender, Marvel. Quote, Oliver stared into the void, and the void stared back. As if you couldn't more blatantly rip off Nietzsche, that it was just like, yeah, you're just, please, an original thought. Just one. And then after the interludes, you had weird paragraphs that added absolutely nothing. And there was one that talked about how the owl was a symbol of like strength and femininity, but it had nothing to do with anything. Here are a couple more choice quotes from the book. Quote, I mean, sometimes you try to fuck the bear, and sometimes the bear fucks you. Quote, so Jed was just telling tales, Nate thought. Maybe that's how writers really were. They were just entertaining liars. Imagine writers writing fiction. You are your own creature. This is your life, and you will face it how you must, and run when you have to. Why did it use creature here instead of you're your own person? That was a weird choice. Also, we need to ban this author specifically from ever using similes ever again. Quote, Carl looked taken aback, like someone had just dribbled a little bit of piss into his turkey stew can. There was also a reference in here to like the dog in that house on fire saying everything is fine meme. Like it literally described a meme in text. It's cringe. It's... Going to descriptions, this author certainly has a style for his descriptions. Quote, he made a face like he had just licked a cat's asshole. You see why I say we ban similes and put his hands in jars. Quote, the same day, Nate sat in his lawyer's office in Longhorn. The lawyer was round and grub white, like the inside of a cut potato. I actually didn't mind that until I read the rest of the book. The world building, it seems random and also made by an adult desperately trying to be relevant with hello fellow kids references. It's just weak and it doesn't matter. Then you have all of the stuff with the multiverses. You got the stuff going around with Edmund that I'm not going to recamp again because I've already been there. The animals, none of it makes any sense. Jake doesn't make any sense. The dead girls make no sense. The prologues don't mean anything. Her magic statues don't mean anything. The dead girls don't mean anything. It's just... I don't know if it was poor planning. I don't know if he didn't edit. I don't know anything about this. The character section, I already feel like I illustrated how there are no characters, like unique characters in this. It's all a joke. Nate should have acted more like a freaking Philadelphia cop that had gone to rural area. Maddie's entire character persona was being a rude woman to say screw society. Oliver could have been a very compelling character that had to learn against his, to lean against his empathy or fight against how much empathy he has that made him a weakness to everybody else, but also to show that empathy is not a weakness and it could be used to help people. And then Jake was nothing but a freaking generic psycho character. The dialogue is pretty pointless to talk about since I shared a lot of my feelings on it already. It felt fake. It felt like it was talking past each other. It felt like it was often set up just to make a point or just to monologue about something specific, and a lot of the time it didn't even make sense, kind of like some of the areas that I shared. Going into the plot relies on characters not telling each other what's going on with their lives and also just throwing in random things to complicate it, feeling like but what if this happened instead? And that's kind of what keeps it going instead of actually solving an issue that was presented at the beginning. And if you remember the beginning, there are great setups in here for things that actually could be worked through, with the empathy issue on his side, with mom and dad constantly fighting and kind of talking past each other, with this idea of a lot of pain being built. And there was a plot here, a good, interesting plot of Oliver trying to solve the world's pain by taking it out of people and thinking that he was fixing things, but then accidentally maybe putting it in somebody else. Consider if this had happened, okay? They moved out of the city because he was so overwhelmed by all the negativity in the city. And so then they move into the rural area where you've got Nate's dad's house. And Nate's dad is constantly getting more negative and then mom is also fighting more because dad is stressed out because dad doesn't like being there. Dad has all of these negative things that happen to him because of his dad that he never confronted. So the pain in him is just growing. And then he's picking on his wife, and then his wife is picking back. And so then Oliver is experiencing this increased pain. And so then he starts sucking that pain maybe out of his parents. So then they start to like talk because they now act like that never happened, right? Because the pain was just sucked out. So now it's not even a thought. But there is no magic without consequence. And so the pain that he's sucked out of them go into somebody else. And he doesn't know that because he doesn't know how his powers work. So then he's like, wow, I can do this. And so then in his little rural area, he has a better, mental space in himself because there's not so much noise. And he starts going around town. And when he runs into somebody who he feels pain from, he sucks that pain out. And they're better. And they act like they never even knew whatever was wrong. Like, everything has changed. But then one day he starts noticing this one guy at school, this one kid at school that is just this dark heap of something. And he can't like get into it. It's just like there's this feeling of familiarity. There's this feeling of despair. And it's just too much for him to bear. And that one kid just keeps getting more and more negative. And maybe it turns into a school shooter since this continually mentions school shooters. And the problem is, because this would be Jake, that every time Oliver had pulled pain out of somebody, it had gone into Jake because Jake was neglected, Jake was susceptible, and as the pain grew, it became too much that even Oliver couldn't really touch it. And so then when you get to the end, when you have of this book, when you have Oliver who pulls the pain out of Jed and then fights this pain monster, it would have made it more personal. It would have made it make more sense because it was actually caused by things that Oliver did. And Oliver would have to learn that people have to deal with their own pain, that he can't just take it from people. As empathetic as he is, he can't just take it from people. Nate needs to deal with the negative emotions that he has with his dad. Maddie needs to deal with the negative emotions she has about herself, that she has about being a mother, she has with her husband. Jed has to deal with his own emotions of the guilt that he has from killing his wife and child. Like having Oliver realize that he can't carry everybody else's pain and he can't just erase it would have actually made the story personal. It would have made the climax matter. And you could have had all of these creepy things or serial killers or bad stories going on in this area and it not be a freaking multiverse. I know I'm asking for a different story here, but I told you there are like bones here of things that it could be. But instead, and there are many other ways that the story could have gone, instead it just went every direction and it was nonsense. Going into themes/other, the number of times that this book mentioned climate change when it had nothing to do with anything, and oh yeah, there's this ghost, but what if it's actually not a ghost? What if it's climate change? That was actually a conversation that happened in this. There also really isn't any foreshadowing for the buildup in all this, at least not that I saw that I could remember, on the theme of children fixing the mistakes of the parents. I think that it can be an interesting reflection depending on how you do it. I know that I have elements of this sort of, but not really in some of my works, and it's less fixing the mistakes of the parents or that the parents ruined everything, and more like the parents want their kids to live better lives than the lives that they lived. Because generally, if you love your kids, if you love your lineage, if you love your family, you want your family to live better than you ever did. Now, there are obviously some that are like, I'm going to make life harder for you. I'm not going to mention the generations that do that to their kids and grandkids. But generally speaking, you're like, I want to live a life and create a future that is better for my kids. And I hope that my kids live better than I ever did because I want what's best for them. And so I don't necessarily mind that. And I also don't mind Nate having hope that his kid will be a better person than he was. But we also never examined what Nate thought made him a bad person, because Nate didn't beat his kid, because Nate was theoretically good to his wife. He was brave. He was a community member in Philadelphia. So like, what demons was Nate fighting? This felt like it wanted to be a personal story, but the author didn't know how to make it a personal story. And instead, we got more on background on Jake and what messed Jake up than what we did on freaking Nate. Sorry, I continuously mess up their names because their names are so similar, which just feels like a throwaway, honestly. The horror in this tries to go for this book also feels like somebody said, your story needs to have big stakes. And the author was like, what's bigger stakes than Armageddon and destroying the multiverse? Meanwhile, you have no connection to the characters. It's not personal. It doesn't matter. Also, it doesn't help much that the multiverse feels like yet another recycled idea, Sonichu would have been more original in this. Sonichu is more original than this. The horror in this also tries every so often to go, isn't this setting scary? It's scary, isn't it? Are you unsettled? We never get answers on where the Book of Accidents comes from, what's in it, why it has power, why it has any sort of magic, what's involved in any of this. You know, and the way you could have tied that into is if Ollie, when he moved into Nate's dad's house and he was given the attic, he could have found the Book of Accidents in the attic. And that was the thing that taught him how to use his powers, which is what it did in here. And that's when he started making changes. And it could have convinced him to be doing this thing by introducing him to accidents that happened because of negative feelings, because of trauma. And then and then Ollie wanted to help people. Like, there were so many things that you could have connected to develop in this to make it interesting and matter. And that's what drives me crazy. And then you got this constant thing with Jake talking to Ollie like, quote, you care about people, the little people, each person. You don't care about humanity. What does that even mean? If you don't care about people, then what the frick does it mean to care about humanity? No answers for that ever. And it just continues to pretend that Oliver doesn't care about people, humanity, because he cares about people. The biggest difference that you can make is caring about people on a one-to-one basis, because you're not going to change the world as a whole, as an individual. You can change people's hearts by who you are, by how you treat people, by loving people. You can change somebody's entire future just by being compassionate and loving. Not always, but nice people change the courses of people's lives. Now, I can't help but think that this is the pinnacle of what the author thinks horror is, as an example. Quote, and after I've killed them, leaving their corpses behind me in a bloodied wake, if you still don't come, we'll come for you. We'll hunt your mother like a dog through the woods. I'll make hurt for what she did to me, Oliver. I'll cut off her fingers and toes and tits. I'll put starving worms in all of her cracks and crevices and secret places. I'll stuff her up with so much pain, Oliver, before she finally expires. As for you, well, you get the taser or drugs, and we'll make you watch. You'll watch it all, and somewhere in there, in the dark of your own closed eyes, it'll snap into place. You'll see what everything is so bad and everything is broken, and it won't just be wanting to escape that singular pain. It'll be wanting to escape for everybody, from all of the pain, and you'll want to take this whole world with you, for your own mother and your dead friends and your gone world father, and you'll want to help all of the other worlds, all the timelines find peace. Also, why does this just come down to freaking Oliver? What's this have to do with Oliver? Why is Oliver the keeper of the freaking multiverses? Where is the prophecy of freaking Oliver? Anyway, so that's that. In closing, shallow emotional depths felt manufactured and a conveyor belt of a book. It feels very obvious when the story is just moving things along and there is no question of anything. There is no pause. There is no thought on the environment, no thought on partners, no interactions really between characters. They are just utilities going to the next point. It also feels like the novel is unfocused. While you can have more than one central plot line going on, I have no idea if this book is about Maddie and her powers, Oliver and his powers, the ghost, the serial killer, how any of this stuff connects, the multiverse. It's just thrust together nonsensically. And it adds that bizarre insertion of attempted humor and destroys all the tension with sitcom laugh track. Unrelated, personal preference in clothing. I don't tend to like chapter titles. They're really cliche and generally just silly. I mean, glitches get stitches, post-coital reality check. Don't call this a thriller. Don't call this a horror. Jar hands. Look, we can't stop anyone from writing. Jar hands. Jar hands are your fate. Those are my thoughts. That was the Book of Accidents. How is your sanity doing? Looking forward to your thoughts and the conversations down in the comments below. With that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
To my children, Tommy, Ike, and Annabelle, if you forget everything else I ever said in the lifetime we shared together, I need you to remember 3 things. 1. Minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature, God's design, to do harm, and every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a black widow. A woman who destroys the life and the mercy of her care for no other reason but the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these kinds of women that you should put them down, for they are no better than the men who tarnished them. However, take no glee in what must be done. Finding any life so far gone, a black hole is where someone's heart should be, leaves only one solution: the mercy of death, and it's a tragedy when it happens. Make no mistake, a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God sees worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she's living. That is why the devil will do everything he can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you can commit during your lifetime, be it out of daring or necessity, for every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man, avoid harming the innocent. For the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, extending further than you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach. Think about every decision you make, every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you, be them destructions or blessings, rumors or history been made. The truth of the matter is, your life will be controlled not by the truth of what you've done, but by the way others carry on about you.